The Solitaire series, Episode 12, The 10 of Diamonds, by Troy Lambert, narrated by Troy Lambert. Cade Nakamura went by his last name most of the time because fucking Americans couldn't pronounce his name no matter how many times he told them how to say it. Some people called him K for short. He never objected. What was the fucking point? Cade? The doctor said as he stepped into the room. Yes, he said, blinking twice. A correct pronunciation? Who the hell? Then he looked at the man's face. Japanese descent, obviously. That was another thing that bothered him about Americans. All Asians do not look alike any more than all white people look alike, no matter what they might assume. Maybe his anger should be directed at the American who had sent him here, not the entire population of the United States. Still, his boss was dead, his future uncertain, all due to some scarred-up gambler that no one seemed able to eliminate. He had no idea why he would be so important to the Queen anyway. There were card counters all over the city making money at their casinos. Why would this one matter any more than the rest of them? Your arm is definitely broken, the doctor told him. But it's a clean break, so no need for surgery. That's the good news. Your ribs will be sore for a couple weeks at least. And my knee? Bruised. You're a lucky man. Who got to you anyway? Nakamura just stared at the doctor for a few seconds. Right. I might know your assailant and even where you can find him, that's all. He may have visited me if you gave as good as you got. Oh, I know who he is and where to find him. Well, you may want to wait a bit before you go after him, at least until you heal a little. He is a half-scarred cripple. I think I got him. Thanks, Doc. Not Jack. Yes, Jack. The one who took out the Queen? That's the one. In that case, you're lucky to be alive at all. Can you just set my arm so I can get out of here? In the meantime, shut up. The doctor moved Nakamura's right arm gently onto a padded armrest, adjusted the height to make sure he was comfortable, and turned away to get a casting set up from a drawer. Cade glanced at his back but stayed quiet. He needed the doc, and whether he liked it or not, his advice wasn't all that bad. Whatever else he might believe about Jack and that fucking dog of his, the man was dangerous. He'd bested some great operatives who'd been sent after him, and in the end, he'd killed the Queen. Ordinarily, that action alone would have made him a free man, but Nakamura had no desire to make it that easy for him. Jack should be free by all rights, but he wasn't. First, there was someone following him. Then, Red Hat, a.k.a. Bert, showed up. Who the hell did that guy think he was? When he'd been about to be kicked out of the club where he'd last seen Bert, Jack had helped him get outside. It hadn't been a Solitaire-owned joint, but whoever owned that club would probably be perfectly content to get a piece of him if they knew what he really had, and the real reason the Queen had wanted Jack killed. He let himself in the room, and Boris barked excitedly. Jack so rarely left him alone, and especially in a strange place, that he was happy to see the curtains and the duvet for the bed were still intact. That also meant Boris needed to go outside, so Jack leashed him and led him back down to the elevator. The pair made their way out to the pet area, and while Boris went about his business, Jack watched the cars entering and leaving the parking lot. It was already late, and halogen lights cast odd shadows across the vehicles parked there. He spotted a now familiar Mustang sitting in one of the corner spaces. That was okay. Bert was staying here, but it was a big hotel in a bigger town. His own Thunderbird rested in a space in the middle of the lot, and he and it would be headed back to L.A. and his home turf tomorrow. He had more connections there, and it'd be easier to defend himself until he could really put this behind him. As he watched, he saw another car pull into the lot, a dark Mercedes, and one he would not have thought unusual except that he could read the Nevada vanity plate from here. Diamond 1. That had been the Queen's car, or one of them. Nakamura might hold a grudge, but he wouldn't know the significance of the ring Jack had, and he had to be acting on his own, unless someone else in Solitaire knew about it, and all the rest. Jack whistled, and Boris trotted back to his side. He made his way back up to the room, his right leg extremely sore by this point. Way too much walking in a day for a crip like you, he told himself. He made his way into the bathroom, dry swallowed a couple of pills, deliberately avoiding looking at himself in the mirror. Truth be told, his appearance sometimes even sickened him, and it also reminded him what lengths Solitaire would go to in order to get what was rightfully his. King. That was the name of the one who came for him and set all this in motion and triggered him to take out the Queen of Diamonds and end all this. But it seemed he had one more obstacle. You can rebuild your stake later, Jack, he told himself, once you've taken care of all this. Until then, it's time to head back to L.A. What do you think, boy? He asked Boris. The dog didn't answer, just stared and wagged his ass, where a docked stub of a tail was all that showed any doggy emotion outside of his face, a face Jack found to be expressive and also comforting. Right. In the morning. 2 nights was plenty to risk in Vegas. He could always come back later. He walked over to the closet and unlocked the safe. Inside there were 3 things. A man's ring, made of a heavy circle of gold. In the center was a huge diamond, shaped just like the diamond on a deck of cards. Under it was a single playing card, a 10 of diamonds. Right next to both items was the simple deck of cards, the cellophane removed. He took that out and locked the safe again. It might just be time to reach out for some help. To communicate, Solitaire and many other organizations used a cipher. Theirs was appropriately based on a deck of cards. If done manually and correctly, it couldn't be cracked even by NSA-level code breakers, provided you never used the same order in the deck for more than one message. The process to create even the simplest of messages took most of an evening, though, so Jack sat at the table with 2 small bottles of whiskey from the minibar, removed the jokers from the deck, and shuffled it 6 times. First, he converted the message he wanted to send into numbers. A was equal to 1, B equal to 2, etc., all the way to 26. He arranged the message in 5-digit groups, not because that meant anything in particular, but because of the code protocol he had been taught. Q dead, LVTLA, erase TRIAL, became 17, 4, 5, 1, 4, 12, 22, 20, 12, 1, 5, 18, 1, 19, 5, 20, 18, 19, 12. By itself, this cipher would be much too easy to solve. It was the first code Jack learned in junior high to send messages. If you were good, you could memorize the number that coincided with each letter and encrypt and decrypt messages quickly. So he created keystream letters by doing what is called keying the deck. To do this, both the sender and receiver of the code would have to use the same key. The most secure method of message transmission would be if both individuals possessed identically shuffled decks. In this case, that was impossible. So instead, Jack turned to the internet. He opened his laptop and located a bridge puzzle, one that used to be posted in print but now appeared daily online to challenge bridge players around the world. He selected a puzzle that had appeared about a week ago, and using the bridge hands listed, then ordered the deck. Jack double-checked the card order a couple of times and sent a message to a popular messaging app where the messages only appeared for a limited amount of time and then disappeared. It simply said, "Last Thursday." He then got to work, placing the 2 jokers he'd removed at position 8 and 21 in the deck respectively. Both cards contained a star, but one was larger than the other, and so he designated that Joker B. B for bigger. He then removed the cards in a predetermined mathematical pattern, creating each keystream letter corresponding to the numbers he had created in the first step. So those numbers became Z, M, NUM, UE, C, UJ, NA, BN, CA, JRU. He then converted those letters to numbers using the same A to 1 code, and it became 26, 13, 14, etc. Jack then added the 2 sets of numbers together one at a time, modulo 26, a cipher trick that simply meant if the sum of the numbers greater than 26, you subtract 26 from the result. This turned the numbers into a new stream. That stream became QQSKQ, GAWG, KSSKU, SWSKA. That was the message he sent, using the same app as before. The recipient would reverse the process to decode the message. He could have done without QDEAD maybe, but he wanted it to be clear about the reason for the rest of the message. Boris looked at him and barked, and Jack realized he'd been sitting in the same place in the same position for far too long. The whiskey bottles were both empty, and so was the water bottle. He stretched out his good leg first, flexing his ankle and wishing he could do the same with his right. He straightened it anyway and moved it the best he could. He felt scarred flesh stretch over the bones, places where almost no muscle remained. He'd nearly died that night, but Boris had saved him, somehow pulling him from the fire without getting burned himself. His would-be assassin was not so lucky. He didn't have a dog to save him, and Jack would never forget his screams. He smiled just thinking about it. Some said Jack had been lucky, but as he struggled to stand, his ruined right arm aching as well, he wondered, not for the first time, if it would have been easier to give up. He had lived a long, productive, and prosperous life with only a few hardships until Solitaire came along and changed all that. Now every single day felt like a struggle. Moments of peace were few and far between. When he finally stood, he headed to the elevator with an enthusiastic Boris in tow. They made their way to the pet area again, greeted by the warm Vegas wind. The evening was clear, and Jack knew there were stars overhead, but he couldn't see them beyond the flashing lights of the Strip, the ever-present glow of the city that never slept. Maybe he should sell the house. Move on. "Hello, Jack," he heard the voice behind him say. A second later, Boris was by his side, growling. Then he whimpered and laid down. "Good boy," the voice said, and Nakamura appeared out of the shadows, looking down carefully as he stepped into the grassy area. "You must tell me some day how you do that," Jack said. Nakamura had a cane that nearly matched Jack's, and his right arm hung loosely in a sling. "Luckily for you, I don't need surgery, but I do have to wear this cast for a bit," he said. "Too bad," Jack replied. "Come on, Jack. I just want to talk for a second." "Really?" Jack stood, uncomfortable, but remaining on guard. "Hell, I'd be foolish to do a thing to you here," he said. "I just wanted to let you know this isn't over." "Thanks. Kind of made that assumption earlier today." "Earlier today?" "Your man, in the club, the other amateur you have shadowing me." "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm sure you don't," Jack said, not certain of that at all. "But even if you really have no idea, I'm guessing even though I've technically done the only thing I needed to do to be free of Solitaire, either you aren't honoring that and are acting on your own, or the organization still has some interest in me. You did kill the Queen of Diamonds. You're right, Jack. You should be free. But this?" The man shrugged his injured arm and winced as he did so. "This is personal." "And the other man following me?" "I am afraid I'm clueless in that area," Nakamura said. "But it sounds like you may have more than one problem, my friend." "Maybe so." "L.A. will not be any safer for you than Vegas." Jack shrugged. "We'll see. I'd love to put this to rest sooner rather than later." "Me too. See you around," Nakamura said, and turned to leave. As he did, an explosion sounded from the parking lot behind them. Jack spun, lost his balance, and started to fall. Boris was next to him in a moment, leaning up against his bad leg and stabilizing him. He ducked his eyes into the elbow of his good arm, really only needing to protect one of them. Yellow flames extended into the sky, and sudden heat warmed the air. Jack's Thunderbird still sat intact, as did the Mercedes with the Diamond 1 plate. The old Mustang in the corner was engulfed, the windows on the cars next to it cracked, their own paint glowing and melting with the heat. Jack and Nakamura exchanged glances. "What the hell?" Nakamura said. "I have no idea, but I'm not waiting around to find out." Nakamura removed a cell phone from his pocket and a moment later spoke into it rapidly in Japanese while walking towards his car. Jack headed back to his room. He emptied the safe, placing the 10 of diamonds in the breast pocket of his suit. He then packed the rest of his things, preparing to leave. Boris stayed right next to him through the whole process. Help might not arrive in time after all. Thanks for listening to the Solitaire series, Episode 12, The 10 of Diamonds. Next up in the series, The 4 of Clubs.